How exactly do you grade a good night's sleep? Well, for most of us, it's just about how groggy we feel when the alarm goes off, right? But in the world of sleep medicine, waking up refreshed, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. Behind the scenes, sleep technologists act almost like medical detectives. They're combing through pages of physiological data to figure out exactly what happens to our bodies the second our eyes close. So let's dive into the exact criteria they use. Welcome to this explainer on the AASM, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, scoring criteria. Today, we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to completely demystify those super complex polysomnography charts. You know, those incredibly detailed graphs that map out a patient's sleep. We'll learn exactly how to spot and score different types of breathing events. Trust me, by the end of this, you're going to be reading these charts like a total pro. All right, so here is our roadmap. We've got 6 main sections today. We'll start off with the golden rules of scoring. Then we'll break down obstructive apnea, hypopnea, central apnea, mixed apnea, and finally, we'll wrap up by mastering how to spot all these different sleep apnea patterns. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, the golden rules of scoring. We've got to establish our baseline first. Because before we can figure out what's going wrong, we actually have to know what data we're looking at on the screen, right? There are 5 essential parameters we track on a polysomnography, or PSG chart. First up, we're looking at airflow to see if breath is actually moving in and out. Then we track duration. And hey, this is a massive rule to remember. For adult scoring, an apnea event has to last a minimum of 10 seconds, no exceptions. We're also tracking respiratory effort, oxygen desaturation, and arousals, which are basically just those tiny, brief awakenings in the brain.
But honestly, if you take away absolutely nothing else from this section, please let it be this golden rule. Respiratory effort is the absolute key to your diagnosis. Seriously. Whether the patient's chest and belly are physically trying to breathe, whether that effort is present or completely absent, is the ultimate deciding factor in how we classify every single one of these events. Just keep that tucked in your back pocket as we go.
Moving on to section 2, let's talk about obstructive apnea, also known as the physical block.
The best way to think about this, it's basically a plumbing issue. The pump is working super hard, but the pipe is totally blocked off. According to the strict AASM scoring definition, an obstructive apnea happens when there's a massive drop in airflow. We're talking a reduction of 90% or more from the baseline. And again, that drop has to last for at least 10 seconds. But here's the absolute kicker. During this whole time, respiratory effort is totally present. The patient's body is physically fighting to breathe, but the air just literally cannot pass through that blocked upper airway.
And you can see that struggle so clearly right here on the PSG chart. If you look at the top line, the blue one, that's our airflow, and it's basically flatlined. But right beneath it, look at those green and orange waves. That's the chest and abdominal effort. Those waves are still going strong. In fact, sometimes they're even moving in opposite directions, which is something we call paradoxical breathing. So long story short, the effort is totally there, but the air is missing.
All right, section 3, hypopnea, or partial airway reduction.
So if obstructive apnea is a completely locked pipe, a hypoapnea is more like a narrowed pipe. It's a partial reduction. The definition shifts a bit here. We aren't looking for that huge 90% drop anymore. Instead, we're looking for an airflow reduction of 30% or more. And yep, you guessed it, still lasting at least 10 seconds. But because the airway isn't totally blocked, the ASM says we need an extra consequence to actually score it. There has to be either a 3% drop in oxygen saturation or an arousal in the brain. And just like we saw with the obstructive events, the physical respiratory effort is still absolutely present.
Let's see what that actually looks like on the chart. See the blue airflow line here? It's clearly reduced, shrunk by at least 30%, but it hasn't completely flatlined like the last one. Meanwhile, the effort channels, those green and orange lines, are chugging along steadily. But if you follow the event over to the right, to actually score this thing, you've got to spot the consequence. You need to verify that purple line at the bottom taking a noticeable dip. That's your 3% oxygen desaturation. Or you need to look for a spike up in the black EEG line, which tells us the patient's brain briefly woke up.
Next up is section 4, central apnea, also known as the signal drop.
Now we're leaving the plumbing issues behind and dealing with an electrical problem. In this case, the brain just temporarily stops sending the signal to breathe. The criteria start out looking pretty familiar. We need an airflow reduction of 90% or more, lasting for at least 10 seconds. But here is the massive, game-changing difference. Respiratory effort is completely absent. The airway itself might be wide open, but because there's literally no respiratory drive coming from the central nervous system, the chest and abdomen just don't move at all.
This chart brilliantly illustrates that electrical failure. Eerie, isn't it? It's just so quiet. The blue airflow line is completely flat, meaning zero air is moving. But unlike the obstructive chart where the chest was fighting so hard to breathe, here the green and orange effort channels are totally flat too. No effort, no airflow. It's literally just a total pause in the entire system.
Which brings us to Section 5, Mixed Apnea, the hybrid event.
As the name kinda gives away, this is a hybrid. It's an electrical issue that transitions right into a plumbing issue, all during a single pause in breathing. To score this, we're still hunting for that total airflow drop of 90% or more for at least 10 seconds. But the effort channels, they tell a two-part story. The event absolutely must begin with absent respiratory effort, and it has to end with present respiratory effort, all while that airflow stays completely blocked.
Let's break down those two halves so we can really grasp the physiological shift happening here. The event kicks off with a central component. Basically, the brain forgets to breathe, so no effort, no airflow. Then, suddenly, the brain wakes up and sends the signal, but unfortunately, the airway has collapsed in the meantime. This creates the obstructive component. The effort returns, the chest starts pumping hard, but the airflow remains completely blocked until the patient finally has an arousal to open it back up.
Let's walk through this on the chart together. Just follow those red dotted lines. For the first half of the event, the blue airflow, the green chest, and the orange abdominal lines are totally flat. There's our central start. Then, right smack in the middle, the green and orange effort lines suddenly wake up. They start waving. The chest is trying to breathe again. But glance back up at the blue airflow line. Yep, it's still completely flat. That perfectly captures the transition from a central event right into an obstructive event before that final awakening.
All right, home stretch. Section 6, Mastering Sleep Apnea Patterns. Let's do a quick final review. Here is your ultimate cheat sheet. Notice how every single event shares that golden minimum duration of 10 seconds? But I really want you to focus on the respiratory effort column here. Notice how it's the absolute definitive sorting key. If effort is present with no air, it's obstructive. If effort is present with some air, it's hypopnea. If effort is absent altogether, it's central. And if it shifts from absent to present, that's mixed.
So the most crucial point is exactly what we established at the very start of this explainer. Remember, effort is the key to distinguishing obstructive versus central events. If you just keep your eyes locked on those chest and abdominal belts on the polysomnography chart, the mysteries of the airflow channel are going to instantly make sense to you.
Well, there you have it. You now have the exact AASM taxonomy to decode these charts just like a true medical detective. The lines on the screen aren't just random squiggles anymore, are they? They tell a super clear story of exactly what's happening in the human airway and the brain. So, taking everything you've learned today, which apnea pattern are you going to confidently master on your very next chart?